On the buzz meter this Sunday, President Obama tells The New Yorker that Fox News and Rush Limbaugh are turning him into a caricature. Why do they keep getting under his skin? Much of the media is still obsessing over Christie, but are journalists giving equal scrutiny to other state leaders? From New York's Andrew Cuomo attacking extreme conservatives, to Virginia's Bob McDonnell getting indicted, to Texas's Wendy Davis, caught by a newspaper embellishing her up-from-poverty story. A Seattle Seahawks star sends his team to the Super Bowl, delivers a diatribe to a Fox Sports reporter.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. When you try me with a sorry receiver like Crabtree, that's the result you're going to get. Don't you ever talk about me.
And is hit by an online avalanche of racist taunts. What in the world explains this ugliness? Glenn Beck says he's sorry for the role he played in dividing the country. What should we make of his admission?
I think I played a role, unfortunately, in helping tear the country apart.
Plus, the media world goes into overdrive over Justin Bieber's arrest for drinking and drag racing.
Congresswoman, let me interrupt you just for a moment. We've got some breaking news out of Miami. Stand by, if you will. Right now in Miami, Justin Bieber has been arrested on a number of charges.
Here we go again, another celebrity train wreck. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. Christie, in case you hadn't noticed, is still a very hot topic for the media. But how does his coverage over the bridge scandal compare to that of other gubernatorial types? Let's take a look.
In terms of the politics of this whole argument from Christie, true or false, is getting harder to believe. Is everybody but a liar but him?
It reminds me of what people on the far right did on Benghazi the second after the Benghazi attack. And it became this rallying cry for the right, just like this Christie bridge scandal has been for the left.
But what about New York's Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo, who got into trouble for saying this?
And if they are the extreme conservatives, they have no place in the state of New York. Because that's not who New Yorkers are.
That's gotten plenty of coverage on Fox, but barely been mentioned by MSNBC and CNN or the New York Times.
Andrew Cuomo's shocking comments about extreme conservatives, like those who oppose abortion rights, having no place in his state.
I think Cuomo had bad choices of words, but he did not say conservatives. You all are conservatives. I don't think he suggests you should leave the state.
Another Republican governor, Virginia's Bob McDonnell, drew heavy coverage after he and his wife were indicted this week for accepting gifts and lavish loans from businessmen seeking favors from the state.
McDonnell was riding high and being touted as a potential presidential contender. Now, Bob McDonnell is just hoping to retire instead of facing a maximum of 30 years in prison.
I have to say, what was he thinking? What were they thinking?
But the Washington Post has been reporting these tawdry details for months with very little national exposure. So what explains the discrepancies involving these governors and Texas candidate Wendy Davis? Joining us now, Lauren Ashburn, Fox News contributor who writes the top Twitter talk column for the Fox website. Jim Garrity, columnist for National Review Online, and Anna Marie Cox, columnist for The Guardian. So what Andrew Cuomo said wasn't a scandal, but what did you make of the coverage?
Well, CNN did one segment. MSNBC covered it on Friday. As you said, New York Times didn't even do a news story. They did an opinion piece. And the Washington Post, no news story and one opinion column.
Well, the New York Times, Jim, waited 6 days and then did do a story that was in the Metro section that led off by saying not that the governor had said something controversial, but Republicans have finally found a talking point to use against him.
There you go. I think probably the reason is because I'm guessing at the New York Times editorial board, saying that all conservatives should be driven out of the state isn't that controversial an idea. You know, it's like, in a perfect world, you know, perhaps we'd like to do something like that. All of these are legitimate stories, but let's face it, the ones involving Republicans get heavy coverage from CNN and particularly from MSNBC. Certain programs on that network who just see themselves as the DNC's, you know, megaphone there. And, you know, look, you want to write about McConnell, you want to write about Christie, go right ahead. Those are legitimate stories, but there are other outrages in this world.
Yeah, in fairness, Governor Cuomo's office says that he was referring to very conservative Republican candidates, whether they could succeed in New York. That's not exactly how it played. But do some journalists see that, for example, Anna Marie, as a non-story because they agree about extreme conservatives?
Right. I mean, one of the headlines is, are there any conservatives left in New York, at least New York City? But, you know,
yeah, there's a whole thing called upstate New York, by the way.
That's true. I said at least New York City.
Yes, you did.
But, you know, the thing is, like, I actually do see there's a disparity in coverage between coverage of Republican governors and coverage of its Democratic governor. It's true that the two Republicans being covered may have broken the law. And Andrew Cuomo just said something kind of offensive, so there's a reason for the difference there. But I actually wanted to bring up one Democratic governor whose scandal is not getting any coverage at all, and that's Earl Tomblin in West Virginia, who's presided over the destruction of a state, you know, because of all this pollution that's happening there. There are still people in West Virginia who are afraid to drink their water. This is an ongoing story down there. There was decades of abuse of the environment, and it's been overseen by a lot of Democrats. And I wish there was some coverage of this story. We only got a blip of coverage when the actual spill happened.
Imagine if it had happened in Manhattan.
Exactly.
Well, I'm shocked that you're actually saying that a Democratic governor should be covered when he wasn't. I would have thought you would be saying the exact opposite.
This Democratic governor should be held accountable. They have let coal companies pollute the waters there, pollute the earth there for a long time. There's studies that have shown that if you live in a coal-producing county in West Virginia, your children are 26% more likely to have birth defects. These kind of statistics are not getting talked about, and I think.
Let me come back.
Some of this you can explain as being part of the New York-Washington Beltway axis. So if it's close to them, they're really interested. I guess Cuomo being up in Albany is too far away for them to notice. But
come on.
Some of that stuff is that. But obviously, in a case like this, West Virginia isn't that far away, and the consequences are certainly big enough to make it.
I think we've agreed on that. But the Christie story, legitimate story. We've talked about this on the program for a couple of weeks now, but seems to have slowed down. Are the media basically trying to keep it alive?
Last week, I defended the coverage, saying, look, this is a popular governor. He's the chairman of the Republican Governors Association. He's running for 2016. But this week, there was one subpoena that was issued, and yet Chris Matthews, as recently as Thursday, led with Christie. And that's a problem. And as we were talking about, what else could we be covering, like West Virginia? What are we missing? Why aren't we delving into other issues?
Even an MSNBC contributor like Nicole Wallace, former Bush White House aide, says that her network and others are propping up Dawn Zimmer. She's the mayor of Hoboken, who made the charges of political payback involving Hurricane Sandy aid. Is there something to that?
Well, Barbara Buono has now probably gotten more hits on MSNBC than she actually got votes in the New Jersey Democratic race.
She ran against Christie,
if you're a New Jersey mayor right now, you can make up just about anything, and MSNBC will put you on there.
Yeah.
Well, you say make up. Now you seem to be suggesting, insuinulating that what they are saying is not true. Or
how thoroughly vetted do you think all of these allegations against Christie are by that network right now?
She had suggestions that you might have. Yeah. And I want to say actually about this too. Yeah, I think it's being overcovered. I think that Christie has some problems in getting the nomination for the GOP presidential nominations. I don't think this is one of them. I think that those things should be covered. His problems should be covered. But also, we're 2 years away. This is going to be a long nominating process. I think that people who live outside the New York, the Acela corridor, are really mystified by this coverage. I mean, I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. I will say that the scandal has broken through in the sense that I talk to people, they know about it, and they kind of roll their eyes.
Right.
I mean,
well,
this is not something that I think everyday Americans are really, really like. To the extent that it was a personal vendetta, they find that kind of interesting.
I think Hoboken's Dawn Zimmer has gotten a pretty easy ride for most of the media. The New York Times did a very puffy profile. CNN's Anderson Cooper did a good interview with her in which he pressed her on the question of why are you coming forward now? Why didn't you say this before? Why did you cover Christie in the past? But I wonder if we'll be talking again about Christie coverage next week. But here you have a former Republican governor who's been out of office a couple of weeks, Bob McDonnell, and his wife indicted this week. And of course, that got a lot of coverage for about 36 hours. For people who haven't been following this, he and his wife got pretty lavish gifts and well substantial loans from a businessman in the state who was seeking state favors. Why in the months and months that the Washington Post has been reporting these details has it not gotten much national attention?
I don't know, because it's a great story. It is juicy. I mean, he went with her to New York, to Louis Vuitton, to Oscar de la Renta, to Bergdorf's, did lavish shopping sprees with her. And she also had a big hand in trying to get an inauguration gown out of him.
This is Maureen McDonald.
Right.
Yeah.
I need to talk to you. This is a quote. This is an email that she actually wrote to her staff. I need to talk to you about inaugural clothing budget. I need answers. And Bob is screaming about the thousands I'm charging up in credit card debt. We are broke. We have an unconscionable amount in credit card debt already, and this inaugural is killing us. I need answers, I need help, and I need to get this done. This is the wife of the governor talking to her staff, who had said the gown that she wanted, we could not ask. They could not ask the businessman for.
I hope you don't talk to your husband that way when you go shopping.
I make him take me to Louis Vuitton.
If you owe that much money, the only person that you should be answering to is yourself. I mean, like, that's just, I mean, I thought Republicans are supposed to be fiscal conservatives.
Much better with the state's finances than with his own finances.
I think a possible explanation here is that McDonald is a little on the dull side compared to Christie, and he's washed up as a future political player. He's not. One time he was a shortlister for VP or even
presidential
president.
Campaign, any presidential hopes ended around midsummer when this started coming out. And he started, well, I didn't do anything illegal, but I'm returning the gifts.
And I'm really sorry, yeah. Let me get to Wendy Davis, because she has gotten a lot of attention recently. She, of course, the Texas Democrat running for governor. Here's something that Maria Shriver did on the Today Show a couple of weeks ago, before a story in the Dallas Morning News raised a lot of questions, or some questions, I should say, about Wendy Davis's background. Let's take a look.
Davis grew up poor, and at the age of 18 found herself pregnant and married. By 19, she was getting divorced and living in a mobile home park.
So Jim Garrity, now the Dallas Morning News' Wayne Slater, reports that there were certain discrepancies, which she admitted to in an interview with the reporter, that she didn't only live in the trailer park a few months, that she was divorced at 21, not 19. And in fact, when she went to Harvard Law, her then husband actually paid for her to go there. But Wendy Davis comes back and attacks the newspaper and says the newspaper's working.
False attacks, which I'm curious about what part was false. That would kind of help. That's usually kind of, if you're going to accuse someone of making a false attack, you got to point out the factual discrepancy. I won't give her too much grief about the line, my opponents haven't walked in my shoes, because her opponent is a paraplegic. Yes, that came across as really awful.
Right.
Let's assume she didn't mean to call attention to that or something like that.
Right, but it is untrue, according to Wayne Slater, the newspaper had any contact with her opponent's campaign. It was a good investigative reporting.
If you run on your biography, you're going to get scrutiny of that biography. John Kerry can tell you that. Almost every candidate can tell you that. So you got to have
it wasn't good investigative reporting, because they didn't break any news, as far as I'm concerned. I think the discrepancy about the age.
You're saying some of this was
all been previously reported, as far as I know. The only thing that was not previously reported is the anonymous content from a fellow city council member who kind of slagged her, and it was anonymous content.
Do you think what I would say is legitimate questions that were raised about the way she's presented and admitted that she has not used the right language has been overtaken now by the other kind of media attacks on Wendy Davis? I
think so. And also, I think that the thing that's not questioned is that she did come from a place that a lot of people who are in her position to be running for governor right now don't come from. She did come up from a poor family. She was a single parent. She did get into TCU, which is a pretty good school, on an academic scholarship, and graduated at the top of her class. People don't get let into Harvard Law because they're pretty.
Okay.
You know,
but the bulk of the story is true, but it does seem that the critics are really unloading on Wendy Davis.
Well, it's a campaign. I mean, what do you expect critics to do? This is how the politics plays. You see what the media can get to write about your opponent.
I'm stunned to find sharp elbows and unfair attacks in Texas politics. All right. So unlike that state.
We'll let you recover during the break. You know my Twitter handle by now. Send me a tweet during the show, @HowardKurtz. We're going to read some of these at the end of the program. When we come back, did President Obama really play the race card in his New Yorker interview? And later, why did the media just lose it over Justin Bieber's arrest?